The morning sunlight filtered through the trees in the small park of Woodville, casting shimmering patches of light on the ground. Mrs. Martha, a 75-year-old white woman with silvery hair and a gentle smile, stepped out of her little house on the corner of Elm Street. In her hand, she held the leash of Rex, her loyal companion for the past 5 years. Rex was a sleek black-coated dog with bright brown eyes, always alert. He walked steadily beside Mrs. Martha, occasionally glancing back at her as if to ensure she was safe. They had maintained this morning walk routine ever since Rex came to live with her. Woodville was known for its peacefulness, but Mrs. Martha didn't know that today would shatter that tranquility. Along the way, Mrs. Martha paused to greet a few neighbors. "Good morning, Mrs. Martha. Out for a walk with Rex again?" called Mr. Peter, the vegetable seller at the small market. Mrs. Martha replied warmly, "Yes, Mr. Peter. A beautiful morning like this would be a shame to miss." Rex gave a gentle tug on the leash, as if to remind Mrs. Martha that it was time to continue their journey. "All right, Rex, let's go." She chuckled and moved forward, unaware that in the distant shadows, a pair of dangerous eyes was watching them. Rex was no ordinary dog. Few people knew that before becoming Mrs. Martha's loyal companion, Rex had been a military dog with an illustrious record of achievements. He had participated in special missions in some of the most dangerous conflict zones in the world. Rex was trained to detect explosives, protect his team, and even confront adversaries in critical situations. On one mission in the Middle East, Rex saved the lives of a group of soldiers by detecting a bomb planted in a truck. Despite being injured, he rushed to alert his team and led them to safety. However, after years of service, Rex was retired due to his age and lingering injuries. Mrs. Martha adopted Rex when he left the military. As a former battlefield nurse, she understood that Rex was not just a dog but a silent hero. She loved and cared for him as a member of her family. But Rex never forgot his past. During their walks, he always maintained a heightened sense of alertness, his ears perked and his eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. This vigilance gave Mrs. Martha a sense of security, even though she never pried too deeply into what Rex had been through. That morning, Mrs. Martha and Rex passed through a quiet area in the park. Tall trees cast ample shade, and the air was so still that only the sounds of birdsong and rustling leaves could be heard. Suddenly, Rex froze, his ears perked up, and his eyes fixed on a thicket nearby. "Rex, what's wrong?" Mrs. Martha asked softly, but the dog didn't respond. Rex moved forward cautiously, pulling Mrs. Martha along. It was an unusual behavior. Mrs. Martha could sense Rex's tension, and her heart began to race. At that moment, she noticed a group of 3 young men in black jackets gathered in a corner of the park. One of them stared at her with an unfriendly gaze. Mrs. Martha tried to stay calm and quickened her pace, but Rex let out a low growl, as if warning of something dangerous. As Mrs. Martha and Rex were leaving the area, one of the young men suddenly rushed out and blocked their path. "Old lady, hand over your bag," he shouted, his eyes glinting with greed. The other 2 quickly moved to surround her from behind. Mrs. Martha froze, gripping Rex's leash tightly. "I don't have anything valuable. Please, don't hurt me," she pleaded, her voice trembling. But they didn't care. One of them stepped closer and yanked at her bag. At that moment, Rex sprang into action. He was no longer just a regular dog but a true warrior. With a powerful leap, Rex took down the thief holding her bag. The man's scream of pain echoed as Rex clamped his jaws tightly on the man's arm. "Damn it! This dog!" Another man pulled out a knife, but Rex swiftly dodged the blade and went for his leg. His military training took over, leaving the attackers no chance to react. Rex was not only strong but also skilled, incapacitating the assailants without causing life-threatening injuries. Within minutes, all 3 men were on the ground, groaning in pain. Rex stood in front of Mrs. Martha, ready to protect her at all costs. Mrs. Martha looked at Rex, her eyes welling up with tears. "Thank you, Rex. You saved my life." But this confrontation was only the beginning of a series of dramatic events. Somewhere in the shadows, those behind this group of thugs were silently watching, and they had no intention of giving up their target. After Rex subdued the group of thieves, Mrs. Martha quickly called the police. While waiting for them to arrive, she couldn't stop looking at Rex with a mix of gratitude and amazement. This dog hadn't just protected her. He had acted with the precision of a trained professional. Rex remained standing in front of her, growling vigilantly, his eyes never leaving the young men sprawled on the ground. Each time one of them tried to move, Rex barked loudly, making them freeze in fear. When the police arrived, they were stunned by the scene. A petite elderly woman and her formidable dog standing next to three thoroughly subdued criminals. "How did your dog manage to?" asked a young officer named Mark, his curiosity evident. Mrs. Martha smiled softly. "Rex is a special dog. He has a past you might never have imagined." It seemed like everything was over after the police arrested the group of thieves. But in reality, this was only the beginning of a series of troubles. At the police station, the three arrested men confessed that they belonged to a larger criminal gang and that the attack on Mrs. Martha was merely a random act to make some quick money. However, what deeply concerned the police chief was the information about the gang's leader, a ruthless man named Victor, notorious for his merciless revenge against anyone who dared oppose him. News quickly spread, and Victor learned that an elderly woman and her dog had thwarted his gang's plans. Enraged, he ordered his subordinates to take care of it thoroughly to restore the gang's reputation. Rex sensed the looming danger. Each time Mrs. Martha took him out for a walk, he became more vigilant than ever. One afternoon, while Mrs. Martha was sitting in her garden, Rex suddenly barked loudly and dashed toward the gate. A masked man, creeping near her fence, froze in place. Before he could act, Rex leaped over the fence, causing the man to flee in panic. "They're coming back," Mrs. Martha sighed, her eyes filled with worry. But she knew she wasn't alone. Rex was always there, ready to protect her no matter what. The danger escalated with each passing day. One night, as Mrs. Martha was asleep, Rex suddenly woke up and began barking loudly. He ran to the door, ears perked and nose sniffing incessantly. Outside, a shadow darted quickly past the fence, but Rex was quick to notice and charged toward it. Rex didn't bark like an ordinary dog. His barks were short, sharp, and rhythmic, resembling the signals used by military dogs to call for help in emergencies. The sound echoed through the neighborhood, waking the residents. A jogger nearby heard Rex's unusual barking and immediately called the police. When the police arrived, they discovered a suspicious truck parked near Mrs. Martha's house. Inside, they found weapons and tools that the criminals had prepared for a break-in. If it weren't for Rex, who knows what could have happened? One officer said, his gaze filled with gratitude as he looked at the dog. However, Mrs. Martha knew this was only the beginning of Victor's plans. "They won't stop," she told the police chief. "They'll come back, and next time, it might be even more dangerous." Not long after, Victor decided to take action. He personally orchestrated a plan to kidnap Mrs. Martha in order to force Rex to surrender. One afternoon, as Mrs. Martha was walking home from the store, a black truck sped toward her. A group of men jumped out, attempting to restrain her. Rex, as always, was by her side. He immediately sprang into action. With incredible agility and strength, Rex lunged at one of the attackers, sinking his teeth into the man's arm. The man screamed in pain and staggered back. But the others were not so easily deterred. Mrs. Martha was dragged toward the truck. And in that moment, she cried out, "Rex, run!" But Rex would never abandon her. He continued fighting, using all the skills he had been trained with to disrupt the kidnappers' plan. Rex targeted the truck's tires, tearing into one with such force that it deflated completely. The vehicle wobbled, unable to leave the scene. Amid the chaos, Rex quickly pulled Mrs. Martha out of the clutches of the criminals. He stood protectively in front of her, his eyes blazing with determination. The police arrived at the scene promptly after receiving a call from a witness. The gang was apprehended on the spot, but Victor remained a looming threat, yet to make an appearance. Mrs. Martha embraced Rex, her voice choked with emotion. "You've saved me again, Rex. I owe you my life." Rex didn't respond, but his eyes shone with trust and love for her. Despite the lingering danger, Mrs. Martha knew that with Rex by her side, she would always have hope to face whatever challenges lay ahead. After the failed kidnapping attempt, the story of the brave dog Rex quickly spread throughout the community, attracting media attention. An article in the Woodville Times hailed Rex as a four-legged hero who had saved Mrs. Martha from a dangerous criminal gang. However, this not only brought admiration but also unearthed Rex's past. One morning, as Mrs. Martha and Rex were out on their usual walk, a middle-aged man in an old military uniform approached them. He had a rugged demeanor, a stern face, but his eyes radiated warmth. "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Martha? My name is Captain Samuel Carter. I'm here because of Rex." Mrs. Martha was surprised but didn't seem defensive. "You know Rex?" "Not just know him, I've worked with him," Samuel replied, kneeling down to look at Rex with deep gratitude in his eyes. "This dog saved my life and my team's during a dangerous mission. I'll never forget what he did." Samuel recounted a heartfelt story about a mission in the Middle East where Rex had detected and neutralized a hidden bomb buried under sand, saving the entire team. "I heard Rex retired and was adopted by you. I'm so happy to see he's as strong and brave as ever." But the joy was short-lived. Samuel issued a warning. "The gang you and Rex are up against isn't ordinary. Victor is a dangerous criminal, and he won't let this go. Rex needs help, and I'm here to make sure he gets it." With Captain Samuel's help, Mrs. Martha and Rex began to gain allies in their fight against Victor's gang. Samuel reached out to old friends in the military and gathered intelligence on Victor's organization. He discovered that Victor wasn't just a typical gang leader but was deeply involved in large-scale arms and drug trafficking operations. The local police worked with Samuel to launch an investigation. They raided an abandoned warehouse frequently used by the gang as a hideout. During one of the raids, they found documents revealing that Victor was planning a direct attack on Mrs. Martha and Rex's home as an act of revenge. Samuel immediately rushed to warn Mrs. Martha. "We don't have much time. I'm staying here to protect you and Rex." Meanwhile, Rex seemed to fully grasp the danger at hand. He tirelessly patrolled the house, sniffing every corner to ensure no intruders could get close. One night, when everything seemed calm, Rex suddenly barked loudly and dashed out into the yard. Samuel and Mrs. Martha quickly followed. In the darkness, a black truck was parked near the fence, and shadows moved swiftly toward the house. "They're here," Samuel shouted, gripping the gun he had brought for defense. Rex didn't wait. He charged straight at the intruders, employing every bit of his combat training. He targeted the leader, taking him down with a single leap and clamping his jaws tightly around the man's weapon-wielding arm. Samuel fired warning shots into the air, startling the rest of the group. The attackers were quickly overwhelmed by the combined efforts of Rex and Samuel. Some attempted to flee, but the police, who had been stationed nearby, apprehended them all. When it was over, Mrs. Martha embraced Rex, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Once again, you've saved me. I'm so lucky to have you by my side." But she knew this wasn't the end. Victor remained the greatest threat they had yet to face. After the attack, Samuel suggested that Mrs. Martha leave Woodville for her safety, but she refused. "I can't leave my home, and I won't let Rex face them alone. This is our home, and we will protect it." Samuel decided to strengthen the house's security. He installed cameras and set up an alarm system. He also trained Mrs. Martha in self-defense techniques for emergencies. As always, Rex stayed by her side, watching and ready to act. One night, Victor himself appeared. He led a group of elite criminals, armed to the teeth, with a single goal: to eliminate Rex and restore the gang's reputation. Rex immediately sensed Victor's presence. He growled, his eyes filled with determination. As the criminals advanced, Rex charged forward, leading a fierce counterattack. Using his agility and training, he confused and disoriented the attackers while coordinating with Samuel and the police to gradually weaken their formation. In this intense battle, Rex suffered a minor injury to his leg, but he never gave up. With the support of Samuel and the police, Victor was ultimately captured. Mrs. Martha's home stood strong, and Rex once again emerged as a hero. After Victor's arrest, life in the town of Woodville slowly returned to normal. But Mrs. Martha couldn't shake off her lingering anxiety. The past few weeks had been overwhelming, and she knew that even though Victor was in custody, remnants of his gang were still scattered. This made her keep Rex close at all times, never letting her loyal dog out of her sight. One morning, as Mrs. Martha was tending to her rose garden, a quiet gray car pulled up in front of her house. A woman in a sharp black suit stepped out of the car. She introduced herself as Emily Larson, an agent from a national security agency. "We've been tracking Victor's gang for a long time," Emily said, her voice calm yet authoritative. "What you and Rex have done not only saved your lives, but also provided us with crucial leads to dismantle their entire network." Emily proposed involving Rex in a special mission to assist in the investigation and take down the remaining members of the organization. "Rex is an extraordinary dog. His skills could make a significant difference in this fight," she explained. Mrs. Martha couldn't hide her worry at this proposal. "Rex has already given the best years of his life to the military. I don't want him risking his life again," she replied, her voice trembling. Emily smiled gently. "We're not forcing him, but if Rex agrees, we'll ensure the safety of both of you." Rex, as if understanding the conversation, looked at Mrs. Martha with determined eyes. He stood up and walked over to Emily, as if to say he was ready. With Mrs. Martha's consent, Rex began participating in the investigation. Emily and her team of agents quickly devised a plan to infiltrate the gang's final stronghold, a large warehouse on the outskirts of the city where the gang stored weapons and illegal goods. Rex was the team's secret weapon. With his keen sense of smell, he helped the agents locate hidden weapons and important documents. He was also equipped with a small camera around his neck, allowing the team outside to monitor his every move inside the warehouse. The raid took place on a quiet evening. As the agents surrounded the warehouse, Rex led the team through a side entrance. With his agility and sharp instincts, Rex detected and neutralized several security traps set up by the gang. In a large room, Rex discovered a safe filled with critical documents. These papers not only revealed the identities of the remaining members of the organization but also detailed other illegal transactions. This marked a major breakthrough in the investigation. However, as the team was retreating, a group of criminals suddenly appeared, led by Victor's ruthless and cunning right-hand man, Marcus. A fierce gunfight erupted. Marcus brought not only skilled gunmen but also rigged explosive traps to prevent the agents from escaping. Amid the chaos, Rex once again demonstrated his intelligence and bravery. He led Emily and the agents through a safe exit he had identified earlier. Thanks to his keen sense of smell and excellent memory, as the team neared their vehicles, Marcus launched a surprise attack, shooting Emily in the shoulder. She fell to the ground in pain but clutched the critical documents tightly. Determined to protect them, Marcus advanced, his gun aimed directly at Emily. In the moment of danger, Rex sprang into action, charging at Marcus with all his strength. He targeted Marcus's gun arm, forcing him to drop the weapon and stumble to the ground. With support from the agents, Marcus was subdued and arrested, bringing the tense chase to an end. Emily was rushed to the hospital and made a swift recovery, thanks to the documents Rex helped uncover. Victor's criminal organization was completely dismantled. All key members were apprehended, and the remaining ones had no place to hide. Although victorious, Rex did not emerge unscathed from the battle. One of the explosive traps had severely injured his leg, making it difficult for him to walk. Mrs. Martha's heart ached as she watched her loyal companion endure the pain. "Rex has sacrificed too much already," she told Emily during a visit. "He deserves to rest and live a peaceful life." Emily agreed and suggested transferring Rex to a special care center for heroic dogs. But Mrs. Martha declined. "Rex is family. He'll stay here, and I'll take care of him." As time passed, with Mrs. Martha's devoted care, Rex began to recover. Though he wasn't as agile as before, he remained her steadfast companion and unwavering protector. Rex's story became a legend in the town, and people often visited Mrs. Martha to catch a glimpse of the heroic dog. One day, as Mrs. Martha sat in the garden with Rex, Emily visited. She carried a small box and opened it in front of them. Inside was a gold medal engraved with the words, "In honor of the bravery and loyalty of Rex, a national hero." Mrs. Martha looked at Rex, her eyes brimming with tears of joy. "You did it, Rex. You didn't just save me, you saved so many others. I'm so proud of you." Rex lay beside her, his gentle eyes looking up at her. Though he couldn't speak, he knew he had fulfilled his mission, not just as a protector, but as a source of hope and love for those he cared about. After receiving the honorary gold medal, Rex gradually became a symbol of courage, not just in the town of Woodville but across the country. People from afar came to meet Mrs. Martha and Rex, bringing small gifts like dog treats, toys, and handwritten letters thanking Rex for his bravery. But behind the praise, few understood that Rex was still battling his own injuries. The wound in his leg made it impossible for him to run and jump like before, and every step brought him pain. Mrs. Martha, despite her age, remained devoted to Rex's care. Every day, she massaged his leg, prepared special meals to aid his recovery, and even learned how to use medical support equipment designed for pets. The bond between Mrs. Martha and Rex grew even stronger. She often sat beside him on the wooden bench in the garden, sharing stories from her younger days. Rex couldn't understand every word, but his eyes would light up whenever he heard her voice, as if responding with gratitude and love. One morning, while tending to Rex, Mrs. Martha smiled and said, "You're not just my protector, Rex. You're my family, and I'll never let you face anything alone." Rex's story didn't stop in Woodville. One day, Mrs. Martha received a letter from the government. The letter announced that Rex had been chosen as the first dog to be honored at the National Heroes Awards ceremony, an event recognizing individuals and animals who had made extraordinary contributions to society. The ceremony was held in a grand hall in the capital, attended by hundreds of officials, journalists, and citizens. Mrs. Martha could hardly believe that she and Rex would be standing on stage to receive such a prestigious award. She rummaged through her old wardrobe, searching for the nicest dress she hadn't worn in years. Rex was also carefully prepared. He was bathed and groomed, and dressed in a small cape embroidered with the words "Hero of Woodville." As Mrs. Martha and Rex stepped onto the stage, the room erupted in applause. A senior official presented Rex with a larger medal and a plaque of recognition. In her speech, Mrs. Martha said, "Rex is not just a heroic dog. He is a testament to loyalty and the power of love." I hope Rex's story inspires us all, reminding us that sometimes, even the smallest act can create a monumental change. The ceremony concluded with resounding applause. The media widely covered Rex's story, and he became a national symbol of courage and loyalty. After the awards ceremony, Mrs. Martha and Rex returned to Woodville. They didn't anticipate how much their newfound fame would attract attention. One day, a stranger appeared at Mrs. Martha's doorstep. He carried a small wooden box and claimed he had something important to give her. The man introduced himself as James, a veteran who had once worked with Rex in the military. He recounted a story from Rex's service, involving a mission where the team faced extreme danger. During that mission, Rex not only saved the squad but also helped uncover a valuable treasure lost since wartime. The treasure had been hidden to protect it from being seized by enemies. James opened the wooden box, revealing an old map and a notebook filled with detailed notes. He said, "Rex is the only one who truly knows the location of the treasure. I believe it's safer now for him to uncover it alongside you." Mrs. Martha was stunned but didn't doubt his words. With Rex by her side, she decided to join James on this journey to uncover the treasure's secret. Mrs. Martha, James, and Rex began their journey to a remote forest where the map led them. Despite his age and injury, Rex guided the way with his remarkable sense of smell. He moved slowly but steadily, each step bringing them closer to their destination. After hours of trekking deep into the forest, they arrived at a clearing with a massive ancient tree at its center. Rex began barking and digging at the base of the tree. James joined in with a shovel, and after about an hour, they unearthed an old iron chest. When they opened the chest, Mrs. Martha and James were astonished. Inside was a collection of jewelry, gold, silver, and priceless relics from the wartime era. But the most extraordinary find was a small journal that told the story of the soldiers who had hidden the treasure to protect it from enemy hands. They had uncovered not just material wealth but an important piece of history. Mrs. Martha decided to hand the treasure over to the government, on the condition that it be used to build a center supporting veterans and retired military dogs. The center would be named Rex, the Silent Hero, as a tribute to the dog who had changed her life and impacted so many others. Returning to Woodville, Mrs. Martha felt a sense of peace. She sat beside Rex on their familiar wooden bench, gently stroking the dog who had stood by her through so many trials. "You're not just a dog, Rex. You're a miracle in my life." Rex lay quietly beside her, his eyes closed, radiating a profound sense of tranquility. Together, they watched the sunset, their hearts filled with love and contentment. The story of Mrs. Martha and Rex didn't end there. It would live on in the hearts of everyone who had heard of them.